What if the most powerful punch Bruce Lee ever threw wasn't with his fists? What if it was an idea? Because Bruce Lee wasn't only a man who moved faster than the eye could follow. He was a philosopher who redefined what it meant to fight, to live, and to be free. And his influence, decades later, is still shaping not only martial artists, but the very way we think about ourselves. This is not the story of a movie star. This isn't even the story of a martial artist. This is the story of a man who turned philosophy into action, and action into immortality. Bruce Lee's story begins in San Francisco, 1940, the year of the dragon. His parents gave him two names, Lee Jun-fan and Bruce. The first tied him to his Chinese heritage. The second was chosen by a nurse in the hospital, a Western name for a boy destined to straddle two worlds. He grew up in Hong Kong, restless, fierce, constantly fighting in the streets. By the time he was a teenager, he had studied under Wing Chun master Ip Man. But Bruce didn't just want to learn techniques. He wanted to understand. He practiced late into the night, moving until his knuckles bled, studying not just how to strike, but why. His friends called him stubborn, even reckless. Teachers said he was uncontrollable. But to Bruce, those moments were the laboratory of truth. When Bruce moved back to America at 18, it was supposed to be a fresh start. He settled in Seattle, worked in restaurants, went to school, and taught martial arts on the side. His students weren't just Chinese, but Americans from every background. That was controversial. At the time, many masters believed Kung Fu should stay with the Chinese community, guarded and secret. Bruce broke that wall, teaching anyone willing to learn. And from that, something extraordinary began to grow. By the 1960s, martial arts culture was rigid. Students were told to memorize forms, to obey tradition, to respect styles passed down for centuries. Karate belonged to the Japanese. Kung Fu belonged to the Chinese. Each style was sacred, sealed inside its own box. Bruce looked at this and saw something dangerous: limitation. He once called traditional martial arts a fancy mess. His argument was simple but revolutionary. In a real fight, the truth matters more than tradition. If something works, use it. If it doesn't, throw it away. He built his own philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. But really, it wasn't a style at all. It was an anti-style. He explained it like this: absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. This wasn't just a new way of fighting, it was a new way of thinking. To Bruce, combat was a mirror. Every punch, every kick, every movement was a reflection of who you were. To study martial arts wasn't just to learn how to fight, it was to learn about yourself. And that terrified people. Some masters called him disrespectful. Others accused him of arrogance. But Bruce didn't care. He wasn't interested in protecting traditions. He was interested in truth. Hollywood, however, wasn't ready for truth. When Bruce began pursuing acting, he ran into walls higher than any opponent he had faced. Casting directors told him flat out, an Asian lead will never sell in America. Instead, he was offered bit parts, villains, servants, characters that bowed, spoke broken English, or existed as a backdrop for white heroes. Even when he auditioned for the lead role in the TV show Kung Fu, a character that was literally written based on his ideas, the studio gave it to David Carradine, a white actor who wore makeup to look Asian. Bruce was furious, but he didn't quit. He turned his frustration into fuel. He taught, he trained, he wrote page after page in his notebooks, ideas about combat, about philosophy, about the fusion of Eastern and Western thought. He quoted Taoism and Shakespeare, Confucius and boxing manuals, blending them into a philosophy uniquely his own. And then, in Hong Kong, He made movies that finally let him express what Hollywood would not. Films where an Asian hero didn't bow in submission, but stood up, fought back, and won. The metaphor he used became legendary. Water. Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. You put water in a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Be water, my friend. To be like water was to be free. Free from dogma, free from identity, free from the past. And that philosophy didn't just echo in theaters. It changed the way people trained. Bruce treated his body like a science experiment. He ran daily when martial artists thought jogging was pointless. He lifted weights when others believed strength training made you slow. He studied nutrition, recording meals in meticulous detail. He even built homemade equipment when the right tools didn't exist. Today, we take this for granted. Every professional fighter cross-trains. Every athlete studies diet and performance. But in the 1960s, Bruce Lee was alone. He was doing things decades ahead of his time. And here's the twist. Bruce Lee died in 1973 at just 32 years old. He never saw how his philosophy would spread. He never saw the rise of the UFC, where fighters train boxing in the morning, wrestling at night, and Muay Thai the next day. He never saw champions quoting his philosophy. He never saw himself declared the father of mixed martial arts. But in a way, that makes his story even more powerful, because his ideas survived him. Today, if you walk into an MMA gym, you'll see Bruce Lee's fingerprints everywhere. Fighters train across disciplines, mixing and matching techniques in search of truth. No single style dominates. No one has all the answers. George St. Pierre, one of the greatest fighters in UFC history, once said he built his entire career on Bruce Lee's philosophy. Be like water wasn't just a poetic line. It was a strategy. Adapt, change, evolve. Even outside the cage, his influence lives on. In action movies that showcase fluid, hybrid combat styles. In actors like Donnie Yen, Jackie Chan, or Jet Li, who built on his foundation. In everyday people, quoting his words for courage, resilience, and freedom. But here's what makes Bruce Lee truly timeless. His fight was never only about combat. It was about identity. As an Asian man in the 1960s, Bruce challenged stereotypes that told him he could only play the villain, never the hero. He refused to shrink himself to fit Hollywood's expectations. Instead, he became something bigger, a cultural icon who gave Asian actors a new place in global cinema. And in doing so, he taught millions of people, not just fighters, that you don't have to live inside the box the world gives you. You can break the mold. You can rewrite the rules. You can, like water, shape yourself. That's why Bruce Lee still matters today. He didn't just influence martial artists. He influenced anyone who's ever struggled to fit in, anyone who's ever fought against limits, anyone who's ever searched for their own truth. His life reminds us that the most powerful philosophy isn't written in books. It's written in action. It's lived. Bruce Lee once said, "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering." And through every fighter who adapts, every actor who breaks a stereotype, every person who chooses truth over tradition, his life is remembered. So when you hear those words, be like water, don't just think of martial arts. Think of freedom. Think of resilience. Think of a man who fought not against opponents, but against limitations themselves. Because in the end, Bruce Lee's greatest legacy wasn't his movies, or even his martial art. It was his philosophy, a philosophy that still shapes the world today. History never dies. It just echoes.